Well, good evening, and I'd like to call to order this planning meeting for the town of Saugeen Shores. And our first order of business is additions, deletions, or amendments to the agenda. And this evening, I'm going to get these signed. We're going to have to, sorry. Just need a second to have these motions signed. Okay, and the first item of business is additions, deletions, or amendments to the agenda, and we do have some additions and amendments this evening, and it's been moved by Deputy Mayor Charbonneau and seconded by Councillor Rich that the agenda be amended by the following. That move item 6.2.2 to item 7.1.2, that's Z44 1844 Unit 4 115 Shipley Avenue. Add item 7.2.1, Bylaw 85-2018 zoning amendment for Saugeen Golf Club. Add item 7.22, Bylaw 86-2018 site plan agreement for Keldon Developments Limited. Is any discussion on this motion? All in favor? That's carried. So the next item on the agenda then is a declaration of pecuniary interest, and I'll remind every member of your responsibility to do so now or when it arises on the agenda.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I'd like to declare a pecuniary interest. I'm not sure what the number of the report is anymore, but on my agenda it's 6.2.1, Saugeen Golf Club. The matter is being brought by my father-in-law, who is a certificate holder in the club.
Okay. So noted. That will be there'll be two of those items on there to the same issue, so that the conflict will stay. That's fine. Fine, thank you. We've noted. So, and other than the next item on the agenda is adoption of minutes, and it's been moved by Vice Deputy Mayor Huber and seconded by Councillor Minaj that the Planning Committee minutes dated September the 17th, 2018 are hereby approved as circulated. Are there any errors or omissions or comments? All in favor? That's carried. So the next item is a public meeting, so we'll hear our planning report, and then we'll ask anybody from the public if they would like to speak to this issue, and then the committee can ask any questions. So the first item then is public meeting Z47-18.46 for Butner and Sousa for 617 Catherine Street and 546 Bricker Street, and I believe Tessa is going to present the report.
Thank you. So, yeah, this is a zoning bylaw amendment for the noted property. So this is right in downtown Port Elgin, just at the intersections of Bricker Street and Catherine Street, and then also close to the intersections of Godward Street and Catherine Street. So just to give a little bit of context, we've got the aerial view here. So directly across the road on Catherine Street, this is Maple Square Mall, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. We've also got the fire hall right up here. So this is in the core commercial area of downtown Port Elgin. It is currently a residential use on both properties, but the surrounding land uses are commercial, residential, as well as institutional. There's municipal water and servicing, and the access to the proposed property would be off of Catherine Street. So what's being proposed is a zoning bylaw amendment to rezone the property to allow for a sixplex on the lot. So it would be rezoned from core commercial to core commercial special. So basically, two pieces of property are being combined to create the proposed lot. So we've got a piece from the property along Catherine Street and a piece from the property along Bricker Street. So the front here and the rear here, which would be severed and then recombined in order to create the proposed lot for the development. So this is the proposed apartment complex here, and this is an existing dwelling with multiple units in it. I believe there's 3 different units in that building. There is a small kind of entryway, which you can kind of see here, for one of those units, which is proposed to be reconfigured in order to line up with the new lot lines. So there'll be a slight change to this building, but very little change is necessary to any of the other structures. So this is a site-specific zoning provision, which will allow for the high-density residential use in the core commercial area without the inclusion of any commercial units. And the proposed, that should say amendment, not apartment, my apologies, would also recognize the reduced lot size for Sousa's property and the setbacks. So that's this property here would no longer meet the core commercial. So I can give a little bit more, so that might give a better sense of the lot. So we've got Tracy Sousa's commercial here, and then the Bretner property here. So these 2 lots proposed to be recombined, severed and then recombined to allow for the development. Now, just to give a little bit of a review, of the policies here. So in terms of the provincial policy statement, the PPS is interested in the vitality and long-term sustainability of settlement areas. And the PPS directs that the majority of growth and development should occur in settlement areas and encourages the development of mixed densities and land uses that make for the most efficient use of land and resources. They also encourage intensification, a range of housing types and tenures, and a compact form of development where it can be appropriately accommodated. The PPS is also interested in the wise use and management of both natural and cultural heritage resources. This property was deemed to have low archaeological potential due to the previous development on the site, and the SPCA did not recommend the preparation of an EIS to address any issues of natural heritage. So it is my opinion that the application is consistent with the provincial policy statement. In terms of the county official plan, the county anticipates that the majority of residential growth will be in primary urban areas on full services, so it is in line with county policies. In terms of the Saugeen Shores official plan, this is a core commercial area. The Saugeen Shores OP sets a target of 10% of all new growth to be in the form of infill and intensification. The development will contribute to that target. The OP also encourages the development of a range of housing styles, tenures, and densities, with 30% of new housing to be medium or high-density development. This proposal is considered high-density. Section 3.10 of the core commercial section of the official plan establishes the permitted uses in the core area, which is a focus on commercial establishments that serve the entire town of Saugeen Shores. However, high-density residential development is permitted in accordance with the high-density residential development policies of the OP. As such, an official plan amendment is not required to support this proposed application, so it would just be the zoning bylaw amendment. So in terms of high-density development is defined in the OP as more than 40 units per gross hectare. This proposed development, even though it's only proposed at 6 units, does represent a density of 65 units per gross hectare, so it is considered high density. In terms, the official plan lists a number of criteria by which to evaluate high-density development in section 3.4.3.3.1. In terms of these criteria that are listed in the report, the proposal meets the criteria really without issue for the most part. The proposed building is only 2 stories and should generally complement the neighboring properties. However, it is noted that efforts should be made through the site plan control process to ensure that compatibility along the eastern boundary, so that would be this boundary here with these 2 adjacent, with the residential properties on either side, should be made in terms of appropriate buffering and landscaping, just to make sure it fits. So the site plan control process is the most appropriate process by which to address these issues of kind of landscaping and buffering. But we don't think that it's anything that can't be adequately addressed through that process. The subject property will be serviced with municipal water and sewer. All costs associated with the extension of services will be borne by the developer. A stormwater management report has also been prepared by the applicant's engineer and is being reviewed by town staff. And there hasn't been any. It hasn't been noted that there's any major issues with that report at this time. In terms of the zoning bylaw, so for the CC zone, generally it permits a wide variety of commercial and institutional uses, and residential uses in the core commercial zone are limited to accessory dwelling units located above or behind the principal commercial use. Now in this case, there's no principal commercial use being proposed, which is why we're going through this zoning amendment process. Yeah, so it's just to allow those 6 residential units without having any commercial units on site. There's also, the zoning bylaw amendment would also recognize the deficiencies as a result of the severances to Ms. Sousa's property. The CC zone requires a lot area of 550 square meters. The retained property along Bricker Street will be 494 square meters. The CC zone also requires a rear yard setback of 10 meters. Ms. Sousa's lot will have a rear yard of 7.85 meters. So despite not meeting the requirements of the core commercial zone, the lot area and rear yard of the property will be largely in line with the requirements of the residential zone for similar properties. In terms of parking, the proposed development requires a provision of 8 parking spaces. As per section 3.24.7 of the zoning bylaw, when all the parking required for a development cannot be located on the same lot as the building, it may be located on another property within 150 meters and within the same zone as the subject lands. So in this case, the applicant has proposed to include parking for the property on the adjacent lot, which they also own. So there would be, I believe, 6 of the 8 parking spaces would be included on the adjacent lot. And all of the parking is proposed to be accessed via the town lane, which is a winter-maintained town-owned lane at the rear of the property. In terms of interdepartmental consultation, Town of Saugeen Shores expressed their support for the, in terms of staff, in terms of meeting the rental housing supply and the objectives of the town's official plan. They raised a few site-specific matters to be addressed through site plan control at the appropriate time and identified those in their comments. So these have to do with servicing, lot grading, storm outlets, and building elevations and landscaping. In terms of the SPCA, they noted that the properties are not affected by any natural hazards and that they did not recommend the preparation of an EIS to deal with any issues of natural heritage. SVC staff also reviewed the stormwater management report and found it to be acceptable. They don't have any concerns in that regard. And there are no other comments raised by any of the other circulated agencies. There are no public comments received in regards to this application at this time. And so, just to recap, this is a zoning bylaw amendment that will rezone the subject lands from core commercial to core commercial special. And will allow for the construction of a 6-plex rental apartment building, and will also recognize the changes to the property at 546 Bricker Street. And so I ask that this report be received as information, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Tessa. I think we'll get to the public. I forgot to mention we will not be making any recommendation or decision on this application this evening. This is just really to obtain any views from the public and the committee, and our planning staff will then return at a later date with a recommendation. So with that, I'll ask, is there any member of the public that would like to speak to this application?
Yes, good evening. My name is Ron Davidson, planning consultant. I'm here tonight with Dane Butner. He's in the corner over there. Dane is co-owner of the subject property that's going to be developed. I don't have much to say. I'll keep this very short. We'll leave it open for questions from council and, of course, members of the public if there are any. The proposal is for a 6-plex, as you heard Tessa talk about. There'll be 2 units in the basement. And then there'll be 4 units that occupy both the first and second floor. So there'll be split level, which is kind of neat for apartments anyways. No need to tell your council that there's a big need for additional rental units in the shoreline area. So this will help. It's not going to answer all the problems, but it will help. Dane himself purchased the property that's the house, or what's been called the triplex. If you've driven by there lately, and if you paid any attention to how it used to look compared to how it looks now, it speaks to what he does to properties when he's done with them. Very attractive looking house he has there, and there's no doubt he's going to carry that forward to the sixplex. He'll be building the sixplex. He is a landscaper by trade, as you may know. So any comments or concerns about landscaping should be put to rest. It will be dealt with through site plan control, as Tessa said, but the landscaping should be top shelf. As Tessa indicated, development like this is strongly encouraged at all levels: the county official plan, your local official plan, the provincial policy statement. They all use terms like infilling, intensification, and efficient use of servicing. Although other policies encourage medium to high density development, as Tessa indicated as well. And this is clearly in conformity with both the official plans at the county and the local level, and is clearly consistent with the provincial policy statement. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Any other member of the public would like to speak to this application? If not, any questions from committee? Deputy Mayor Charbonneau.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks for the presentation, Tessa. It's, I mean, absolutely right. It's a good opportunity to add some badly needed housing to and in an appropriate location in the core. It's a good opportunity. My question is with regard to, you suggested, Tessa, in your report that the easterly retained lot will be changed. Zoning will change from core commercial to residential. Is that the case, or is that not? Did I just misunderstand what you said there? It's the whole thing's going to become core commercial special, and there's no residential proposed at all.
No, it would stay core commercial. It would just be a special provision.
Right.
It would just, the zoning provisions are in line with similar uses in terms of residential zoning. So it pretty much matches what the residential zoning is in Saugeen Shores for an R1 property. But no, we would keep it core commercial and just have it special to recognize that reduced lot size and setback.
That's good. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tessa, I have a question, and it actually applies to another application too, just as a general question about this refers to the SVCA comment about the fact that significant wildlife habitat may be located on or adjacent to the properties. And then there's a statement, this is on page 13, that says, it is the responsibility of the applicant to ensure that the endangered species and threatened species policies referred to in the PPS has been appropriately addressed. So my question, just generally speaking, how do we follow up with that to make sure that that has happened?
Generally, we don't. It is, in terms of endangered and threatened species, it's really everybody's obligation all the time, right? If you find an endangered species on your property, whether you're developing or not, you have an obligation to take action to protect that. Everybody does their protected species, right? So we encourage applicants to follow up and when they're doing development to see if there's any particular things that should be noted, such as, when tree cutting could be done to best protect, especially in this area, it tends to be, the best times of year to remove trees if necessary in order to protect nesting and bat habitat and that sort of thing. But it's really everybody's responsibility to ensure that we're the same way. If you find if you're doing any digging and find a cultural heritage artifact, right? Like if you're digging and find an archaeological resource, it's your responsibility to follow up and take appropriate action. It's the same thing with the endangered species policy. If you find it, it's your responsibility to follow up.
That comment, the Conservation Authority does that. It doesn't mean that they found it on that particular lot. It just means it may have been in the area. And I think they've got and the chair probably knows better than I think it's a 1 kilometer radius, or it's a fairly big radius, and 5 kilometers, is it? So, I question it sometimes. Anyways, I'm not going to go there. Councillor Dave Mayap. Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
Thank you. Also about the overflow parking. It would appear that the existing parking for the current residential structure is actually on what will become a new lot. So will the site plan control element take into account that I believe this overflow parking area is going to be parking for the triplex too? So is all of that playing into this? Because the parking for the existing building is about to disappear, most of it anyway. So the parking that sort of shows on the new lot that's about to be created, all of that's just excess already? Because I've seen vehicles parked there.
Yeah, and turn your mic on when you get there.
So yeah, currently there's the lady that accesses the basement unit on the side. She just has a gravel driveway, so she parks there. She will be parking at the back of the property, and then the two other units will be parking on the left side of the property.
Okay, my question was just to make sure that as the site plan happens, that all of the parking needs seem to be picked up along the way. I also wanted to ask, I'm assuming that the new development will benefit from cash in lieu related to parkland, but and I realize that the CC zone, as you can build right out to the lot lines, but it's hard to tell from the site plan about exterior amenity space. Is the intention to have any outdoor space for the use of tenants of 6 units, or is the intention really to fill the space with a structure and then have parking? And again, I realize that the commercial core area has different ideas of building out to lot lines, but just as 6 units. So is there any intention to put in outdoor amenity space there?
Yes, there is. One of the things when we were playing with this drawing, and by that I mean the engineers and Dane, and we've met a few times with town staff and the county staff. The original proposal was to go bigger with a bigger footprint. That posed a few problems. One of which was parking and also snow storage. So Dane went smaller footprint, which meant a lesser amount of parking required. So behind the sixplex to the immediate north, there is a grassed area that's proposed, where in the summertime people will be able to, yes, right where they people will be able to, if there's going to be a picnic table, or I'm not sure exactly what. In the wintertime, of course, not too many people sit outside. It'll be snow. It'll be this snow storage area. So yes, that has been taken into account.
Just, Ron, you've also have porches proposed for some of the units, right?
Sorry?
You also have porches proposed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Councillor Minot.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of side thoughts and then one bigger one. reason why we do site plan control and say that that parking will be available to the new, and we don't merge that back parking lot untitled with the new entity? What's the difference and why do we have it that way? That would be my first question. Why do we say it's going to be a site plan allowance to allow people to park on the neighbor's property as part of the new development? Why don't we just sever that piece of property and make it part of the new property and say it's now one new parcel of land, including the parking area? What determines which way we do this?
Well, I guess I'll take a stab at that. Your zoning bylaw does allow for it. It does give consideration for parking next door. That was discussed, the idea of creating an L-shaped lot between Dane and myself and the engineer, has felt that it was probably made more sense to keep them uniform. And there's not in my mind, there's not a negative side to doing it this way. The zoning bylaw allows for it, and through site plan control, it's all handled.
Okay, I can move past that. I just wanted to hear the argument. I guess the discussion as to how we end up there. Could we put the 5,000-foot look with the satellite view up, please? No, the aerial photograph. No, you've got a single slide here. Okay, I just have to minimize it because I got it blown up. Hang on a second.
It's page
19?
Yeah. Page 9. Page 9.
9?
Oh, they don't have the same thing as we do.
Yeah, I don't have that big of an aerial image, but it's the same aerial image in the slideshow versus the report. Yeah.
So here's my thinking process here is I'm not convinced the triplex has enough parking. Maybe I should pace it off, or we should take some measurements. But and the new sixplex, I'm not convinced that there's enough visitor parking. And what we do is we say, well, you can use some off-street parking, which is perfectly legal. I'm assuming. What I can see here is that in front of the property is, and I'd like to think that Amanda could work with, as staff, could work with a developer, and possibly we should be asking for the grass strip that is, it's an enlarged shoulder boulevard area, parking area, so people don't usually park on the grass, they usually park on the gravel. To the west, there's a business there, and you can see that the grass is all gone, and it's clearly a full-blown parking opportunity. So I'd like to see it developed as a full-blown parking opportunity along the front of Catherine Street for the triplex and for the sixplex, and develop those as full-blown paved, if necessary, parking spaces to complement this proposal. So that would be one comment, and then my final one, Mr. Mayor, thank you, is maybe we could hear from Amanda at this lane is extremely important to the community for a number of reasons. You can see the traffic that is using the lane, including the fire department. I'm surprised that Phil didn't say something, and doctor's offices there, and the Chamber of Commerce, and we know that lane is a transport truck route. That they use it to access the back of Ralph's Highway Shopette. They cross Highway 21 by aligning themselves off of Bricka Street. They go down that lane. So to me, it's vitally important that we control the additional vehicles that are on that lane, because what it says to me is we're going to spill the cars out of that back parking lot. They have to turn left. They cannot turn right. They have to turn left. They're not cutting through somebody else's private parking lot, so they've got to spill onto Highway 21. It's a one-way lane, and I think that we need to address it under site plan control. We need to, in my opinion, we need to make sure there's good signage at the exit entranceway to the parking area, that says you're making a left turn only here, and it's one way, and make sure they have a one-way sign they can see. Otherwise, we're going to get into some difficulties, and make sure that they don't spill the cars parked out. I would like to see some sort of fencing between the lane and the property of the parking lot, so that the cars cannot do what they're doing at Keepsakes and Memories there, spilling out into the lane, which makes it difficult for the transport trucks and for fire trucks, if necessary, to use that laneway. So that would be my last comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Go ahead.
Sure. If I may address Councillor Menage's comments. First of all, with regard to parking requirements, the triplex requires 4 parking spaces, and the proposed sixplex requires 8 parking spaces for a total of 12. And the site plan before council that's been prepared here does in fact provide 12. So we are meeting the requirements of the zoning bylaw with regard to parking. With regard to access along the lane, certainly let your engineer speak to that, but that is something that we spoke about as part of our pre-consultation discussions. We were obviously very interested in knowing what town staff comments were, and I believe it was Amanda who actually spoke with the fire chief about this very topic. And the comment that came back to us was, you can park back there, but it's got to be controlled parking. Just don't have an open, what do we have, 35-meter strip of pavement where you can just pull in wherever you want. So that's where, if you see on the site plan, it's kind of hard to see, but there are 2 controlled, you're doing a good job there. There are 2 controlled entrances to the parking area. And that reflects my understanding, the wishes of the fire chief.
Thank you. Any further comments? And thank you, Tessa, and thank you, members of the public. Staff will come back with a recommendation on this at some future date. Now, the next item on the agenda then is 6.1 is delegations, and it's Ron Davison. He's the planner for Unifor, and welcome again, Mr. Davison.
So a few months ago, we had a public meeting in here regarding this proposed official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment for the Unifor parking lot. And then after that, we had a follow-up council meeting where there were delegations speaking in favor of it and speaking against it. Since then, town has retained the planning services of an outside planning consultant to take a look at this proposal. As you're aware, the county planners are recommending approval of the application. The peer review study that came back does not recommend approval. I don't want to critique that report, but I will say just a couple of things. The peer reviewer certainly focuses heavily on the issue of whether or not the existing parking lot is a legal non-conforming use. And I'm not really sure why we do that. We've never attempted to make the argument that we're proposing to expand the legal non-conforming use. That's never been part of our argument. The peer reviewer also makes the argument that the parking lot is not in keeping with the intent of the shoreline residential designation. Well, we concur that it's not a permitted use, and that's specifically why we applied to amend the official plan to allow for it. If the proposed institutional use or designation, which would allow for parking, is not in keeping with the shoreline residential designation, I guess that begs the question, does the rest of the Unifor properties in the area, which are also designated institutional, does that mean they're not appropriate for this area? I really don't think, I can't speak for council, but I don't think that's council's opinion. Next, the peer reviewer suggests that this is an unusual location for a parking lot. There's one right across the road from it, so I would disagree with that comment. The peer reviewer also says that there's ample parking up the hill. Since our last meeting, the architect did provide additional information as to why there is a need for parking on this side of the road. So he's demonstrated that. That was not reflected in the peer review study. I'm I'm going to conclude by just saying that I respectfully request that you consider the comments made by your own planner, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Any questions of Mr. Davidson? Doesn't look like any. Thanks, Sean. So, oops. The next item on the agenda is a report, and it has to do with zoning bylaw Z3418.44. It's a Saugeen Golf Club at Bruce Road 3, and I believe Daniel is going to present this report.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. This is an application to rezone a portion of the Saugeen Golf Club lands. These are their unused plans that lie east of the golf course. So this is a zoning bylaw amendment to rezone a portion, approximately where the laser pointer is right there, from Open Space 3, Special Provision 3, to Agricultural Special Provision 60 with a hold. With a holding provision. There was a public meeting held on August 20th. So this is a recommendation report, and the recommendation is to approve the proposed zoning bylaw. So just to give you some context, this is sort of a two-part application. The first part was a Bruce County official plan amendment, and that was for the entirety of the lands, so this blue area, and that addressed an official plan policy that says no more than 3 lots can be created from an original crown lot of 100 acres. So the amendment was approved on October 10th. There were no appeals, so it's now in force and effect. It's policy, and it allows a 4th and 5th lot to be created on the lands. So the purpose of the zoning bylaw amendment is to really refine where on that lot those 4th and 5th lots may be located, and under what sort of provisions they might be located. So this area was identified by the applicant, and it's the preferred area in terms of planning staff's opinion, because it's off of the county road, which is a busier road than Dahl Side Road. So this is the proposal, potential proposal, I should note. So the proposal is to develop up to 2 lots, and that's depending on the outcome of a number of specific studies that are needed to demonstrate the viability of the lands for residential use, to ensure they're serviceable and stormwater and so on is contained on the lands and doesn't negatively impact neighboring houses and so on. So the frontages are shown as 70 meters by 82, and that would sort of split the proposed area in half. And just a note from the last meeting, we've provided a little more wiggle room in terms of how much frontage might be required. So we've gone down to 50 and reduced the lot area from the last meeting, and that's to recognize that the studies might come back and say one lot has to be a little bigger than the other. So this would allow that instance to happen. So you might have one lot that has a larger frontage and one that has a smaller, rather than 2 at 70. There is sort of a topographic feature there, a hill, that may impact final design. So the application is structured in such a way that only residential uses would be permitted in the agricultural special, proposed agricultural special zone, including associated uses such as home occupations, home industries, and so on, as well as uses that are currently permitted in the open space zone. So those uses would be golf course, wildlife preserve, and things along that line. A holding provision is proposed. A nitrate study, a hydrogeological impact study, stormwater management report, and grading plan would be required prior to the removal of that holding provision to the satisfaction of town staff. And I should make a note that I suggest employing caution in advancing applications without the necessary supporting studies being in place to demonstrate the viability of the lands. It creates anxiety for the public, and I think we sensed that during the public process, and ultimately it makes it difficult to know if the proposal represents good land use planning. However, I do feel that sufficient protections are in place with this file, both through the approved official plan amendment at the county level and through the holding provision that's proposed. So we're ensuring that no new residential lots will be created that are not viable to the prospective purchaser or that will negatively impact existing residents. As mentioned, we did receive a number of comments, both in writing and through the public meetings for the zoning bylaw amendment and at the county level for the official plan amendment. And they pertain to impacts in groundwater, impacts to agricultural, natural heritage, drainage, and just quality of life in general. I speak to these concerns in the staff report. In general, I believe that these supporting studies that will be required as part of the consent applications will alleviate many of these concerns. And that is, of course, a public process as well. And the neighbors will be circulated on through that process and will be privy to the same studies that county and town staff will be using to determine the lot viability. So as a recap, this is a zoning bylaw amendment to rezone the lands from open space 3 to agricultural 60. Special 60 with the holding provision. There's special provisions for reduced lot frontage and reduced lot size. And a holding provision is proposed pending the outcome of the studies I mentioned earlier in the presentation. The proposal is consistent with the PPS, which does allow limited rural residential uses. It now conforms to the county OP, and it is in keeping with the town zoning bylaw. And just as a follow-up to the public meeting, Councillor Huber had asked about the location of a sign regarding source water. It's just east of Dalside Road, and it's on Bruce Road 3. And my understanding is the town and the source, the Grey Sauble Conservation Authority staff went through an exercise several years ago to identify sign locations. That location was picked because it, excuse me, because it alerts emergency vehicles heading into the town from other jurisdictions that they're entering an event-based area, which is it's actually further delineated up the road on County Road 3, closer to Highway 21. But that sign location was chosen to give them advance warning. So that would be for major spills and so on. So to conclude, the recommendation is for approval, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Daniel. Then the recommendation is that the zoning bylaw amendment Z34 18.44 for the properties described as concession 13, part lot 13, registered plan 3R7204, part 1, the town of Saugeen Shores, be approved and the necessary bylaw be forwarded to council for adoption. Questions? Councillor Mike Myatt. Comments?
Yeah, a couple of comments and a question of the planner, if I may, Mr. Mayor. Saugeen Golf Club is a very important recreation amenity for Saugeen Shores. Been around for over 90 years, and certainly these two lots that they're wanting to create will contribute towards the long-term viability of the club, no doubt. So I will be supporting the recommendation this evening. I did have a question about the nitrate study, the hydrogeological impact, stormwater management comprehensive grading plan. Through to the planner. Dan, at what point in time with this approval, are there any restrictions placed on in terms of when those studies have to be done? I mean, there's severances obviously have to take place. is it at the severance step? Is it transfer of lands to new owner, resale, and selling of the land? What point do those 4 studies have to be completed?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the studies would have to be completed as part of a complete application for a severance application. The whole idea is those studies help us determine the lot configuration. So it answers a couple questions. One, are they able to create 1 or 2 lots? Is there enough space for 1 or 2 lots? And if it's 2 lots, the lot configuration specifically, where is that middle lot line? So it would be sort of at the onset of a consent application, and it would be helpful in determining what those lots will ultimately look like.
No set time. I mean, it could be the severances. I mean, it could be 6 months, could be 1 year, could be 2 years, depending on the speed of the applicant in terms of applying for severance. Correct? So it could happen.
Yeah, I mean, there's no expiration to this provision in the zoning bylaw,
Right.
so it's there. That hold remains in place, and the reason for the hold is partly to protect prospective purchasers, so they know there's
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Minaj.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Is it possible to put the site context slide back up?
This one? Or
It's the one that shows that one. Thank you.
Okay.
So can you just do this for me again? We used to have a 100-acre parcel could only be split into 3, and now we've moved to this could be allowed to go to 4 and 5 lots.
So 3 including the retained, so I'll count them.
Yeah,
So,
I'd like you to do that. Thank
okay, so there's this lot on the corner is 1.
you. Yep.
This lot here would be 2, and then the retained is 3.
Okay, so this brings me to my point. Thank you. So why, if we're going to do a study are we only studying the lands subject to the orange boundary? Are we only going to study that area, or why wouldn't we just say to the owners of the land, do your study and pick 2 parcels of land that are no larger than 2 lots of this size anywhere on that area that you'd be willing, so we don't handcuff them. Mm-hmm. If it turns out that lot 1 can only exist by, you said, cutting it and shifting it and then maybe downsizing, mm-hmm. but on the north side of lot 2 there was land that they could easily have moved to, why wouldn't we just say to them, you can have any 2 lots facing the Doll Side Road or with a driveway? It could be backed off. If you're concerned about that hill being a feature that they may push, let's just identify the 2 parcels, delineate what they are, and say you can have any 2 anywhere on that property that meets the terms of your study.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a fair question, and in reality, it was a back and forth over several meetings where we sort of landed on this area. There's a couple reasons. One, it's outside of the SPCA regulated area, and that was important, more so for the applicant. As I'm sure you know, there's costs associated with development in the SPCA area, regulated area. So that orange area is actually sandwiched between the SPCA regulated area. There was also discussion on having them front the county road, which wasn't preferable to us, county staff, because the county road is busier and more entrances on the county road creates more hazards and so on. And another reason in sort of restricting it to this area is, in the grand scheme of things, I think it's our preference that these lands be developed through a plan of subdivision comprehensively. And if we were to just to pick a lot here and here, for instance, that may negatively impact the future ability to comprehensively plan those lands as a plan of subdivision. They do fit within that context. The state rural lot policies of the county do envision sort of larger state lot residential subdivisions in this area, in areas adjacent to high scenic amenity value and golf courses and so on. So that's sort of our preference for keeping it to a specific location at this point.
To be clear, I just wanted to hear you say that again. I thought you said at the beginning it was restricted by Bruce County official plan that there couldn't be any more than 2 parcels of land separated on this 100-acre parcel, and yet I think I just heard you say it's eligible for site plan control for an estate lot development.
That's what the county official plan amendment permitted.
Yeah, I think we have to be
We
careful.
changed the county official plan as it applies to this lot.
Agreed. So it's going to be restricted to 2 parcels, not something more in the future.
It was originally restricted to, as Daniel described, 3, and the amendment permits these 2 additional ones.
But it will never be more than those 2. Is that what you're telling me? It could never be more than those 2.
It could be. I don't know what the future would bring.
Okay, I think I made the point I was trying to make was if it's only ever going to be 2, then why couldn't it be 2 just about anywhere that it fits the model? And if you're telling me that you've got restrictions on it and you want it just to be those 2 in that location, then I'm okay with that. Thank you.
Councillor Dave Mayer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And my question, unfortunately, is along the same lines. And just a clarification in my mind, you said that originally or by a standard, the county allows on a crown 100 acres no more than 3.
Yes.
But in this case, we're making an exception and going to 5, or was there a change in county policy that says that 3 has now become 5?
No. There's been no, I guess the exception would be through the amendment, the site-specific amendment that says, in this case, on this property, a 4th or 5th lot is
appropriate
now.
for this location.
Correct.
But typically for a 100-acre crown property, the limit would be 3 without an exception such as this.
That's right. That policy remains in effect in the county official plan. That is the reason why we amended it, to allow these, why it changes, okay? So, and it's only specific to this lot. Any further questions? All in favor of the recommendation? Opposed, if any? That's carried. So the next item on the agenda then is, I think I've got this right, it's it's staff report. It's for, I'm going to do this one here. Okay, yeah. It's a staff report for Keldon Developments Incorporated, the site plan control agreement, and I believe Jay is going to present.
I don't need to say much other than that this is part of the Summerside development. That this block just north of the intersection of the first roundabout as you enter and travel west along Devonshire, go north on Waterloo Street, sort of under construction now. I'm not sure if I'm providing any helpful context. But this is for a 35-unit townhouse development, very similar to what's been built at Grenville Estates, and sort of in keeping with the other, that type of townhouse development, the landscaping, the servicing, even the building design are they're all very similar and hard to tell apart. So it's something we're familiar with and are confident in our proposal. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Jay. There's a recommendation that the council pass a bylaw to authorize the site plan agreement with Keldon Developments Incorporated, and that the council authorize the Director of Infrastructure and Development Services to approve subsequent revisions to the site plan associated with the subject lands, provided the revisions are in general conformity with their overall site plan and compliant with the town zoning bylaw amendment. Comments? Councillor Dave Mayette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just the question, is my understanding correct that these townhouses will be freehold townhouses and that the purchasers of these townhouses won't own the land? It'll be sort of a condominium?
Yeah, that's the intention of the developer. He hasn't applied yet for the condo, but as Grenville Estates went, it was a phased condominium, and every block of 5 would be part of the condo, and they'd own the building and then have a common element maintaining the parking areas, the grass, etc.
Right.
Councillor Minaj.
Okay, well that's interesting, because I was so this is very similar to the other one where we discussed the fact that it's private roads. they're not public roads, and it's going to be their decision whether they recycle or not, or and their garbage will be picked up by not by the municipality. It'll be picked up by somebody else. All that will be in that site plan agreement.
It won't be in the site plan agreement. Our bylaw, our site plan agreement will regulate the location of the refuse containers, and it may have a note. Well, we'll have a note that says that the landowner is responsible for those services, but we don't negotiate with them how often they pick up, etc. Privately managed waste removal.
Thank you. Vice Deputy Huber.
Thank you. It's just a comment on the landscaping, and it appears to me as though there's a lot more vegetation in this drawing than one we might have seen prior to this. But I do just still note that the future street marked on the top, it's noted as Future Street 5, I think, as it would be sort of a new construction. It's disappointing to not see a little more vegetation there, because I think when it's a brand new construction, we have a chance to build a street in a way that's sort of more akin to a neighborhood kind of feel that exists in the rest of the town. So I just would like to put in again a request for a good look at the planting of trees on any street, but in particular when we're creating a new street, to maybe try and get a few more in as other things are going in the ground so that everything is put in the right spot. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further? Councillor Bankman.
Yeah, see you, Mr. Mayor, to the planner, Jay, just in terms of compliancy with the town zoning bylaw. In comparison to the Grenville development, which is a really nice development, I think the homes over there are 12, 13, 1,400 square feet. Two questions I have. That means a real need for this type of housing in the community, no question. I understand they're around 1,200 square feet. Would that be correct? That's my first.
I think so. I don't have a specific amount, but it sounds right.
Yeah, when we talk about the 30% compliance with the town's zoning bylaw from a vegetation standpoint and the overall site plan, if you compare the Grenville development, I'm seeing a lot of nice green space in the mapping in this development, which is nice centrally. Is it going to be comparable to what we see over there with that development?
Yes, I would say in the amount and even the mix is comparable. If you scaled them, there would be 35 units with I think there's about 30 trees. There's 55 at Grenville with 55 trees, and then a mixture of shrubs and grasses as well that were distributed throughout the site. So it compares, similarly to Grenville Estate.
Okay. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just occurs to me, just looking at the site plan and then at the broader key map, this development is right adjacent to the roundabout between Devonshire and Waterloo Street, and I just wonder how does the new development interact with the roundabout in terms of crossing the street? Like, I'm absolutely certain there's a design for that you have, but I just wonder where does it, because I assume kids going over to Northport will need to go down to Goderich, I guess would be the best way to get there, or back up to whatever the next street. I mean, I'm sure there's a through street. Probably the closest way is Goderich, eh? So do you cross over? Do you cross up mid block or something? Like, how do you cross?
Well, at the roundabout there are crossings, I think, at each corner. And so in this particular case, there's also a pedestrian connection that goes along the west side of the development. So it runs on the west side to the roundabout. You cross the roundabout on either the north or south side to Goderich, and then on the sidewalk on either side. And this is the short term, of course, because Waterloo Street, if it is built all the way to the school, it will be pedestrian access that way.
I just wondered, if I may, Mr. Mayor, I just wondered if that crossing is, because people coming around a roundabout, I mean, it's a little different in terms of how you go in there. I just wonder if the crossing for that is just a little further up the street.
I could defer to Amanda, but it isn't at a normal. It wouldn't be at your typical T intersection. It's a little separated from the roundabout to allow for more visibility and it's all about visibility and safety, so it's a little more visible for vehicles and pedestrians to cross.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any further comments? All in favor of the recommendation? That's carried. Oops. So the next item is we will move into council. And so I guess we'll call to order this council meeting, but the next item is a report. It's a 7.11. It's the Union Building Corporation, 115 Shipley Avenue. And I believe, Jay, you're going to present?
I'm only going to present briefly to set the context, and we've invited our planning consultant to assist and provide information to council as well.
Okay.
So I will invite him up at the appropriate time.
Okay.
The first, just like as a context, to recall that we met on August 20th to consider the Unifor parking proposal on Shipley. The recommendation from the planning committee was to refuse the proposal. But following that meeting, town staff deemed it appropriate to do two things, and I've outlined them in the report. One is meet with the applicant to see if there was make sure that we could get council better and more accurate information. There was a lot of stuff said and commented on at the meeting, but was there a way to distill it into more discrete chunks? I've attached the pieces of information that we between Unifor and town staff were able to say, well, this is important, let's give it to staff. So there's three things. There's written correspondence from Unifor clarifying certain items, and they're outlined in the attachment. There's concept renderings of the proposed parking areas, so it's not just what you can imagine anymore. This was what was going to be built. And then the third drawing is an overall parking plan for the Cove site, so you can sort of see how it fits in the context that was new as well. But the second thing that staff did was to see if there was see if we could find a third planning opinion, and we invited Mark Dorfman to prepare an opinion to provide a objective comment, a planning comment, expert comment on the planning matters. And so he's provided the report that's attached, but invite him up to highlight anything he wants and invite questions from council if needed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. My name is Mark Dorfman. Thank you for the opportunity to provide an independent planning opinion. This is not a peer review. I looked at the information that was provided to me. I obviously visited the site, and I did some independent research as well to arrive at my opinion. I looked back in time to understand the existing status of this land use as a parking area. And back in 1951, which I discovered, there was a plan of subdivision that was put on quite a large area. 10 lots were created by a county judge. And that plan of subdivision established 2 lots, and you'll see the drawing in my report, 2 lots, lot 1, lot 2, where the subject property is on the west side of Shipley. It's about 2.27 acres. It is 1 registered lot. It's not 2 lots. And the reason it's 1 lot is that in 1988, the township of Saugeen took road widening. And once you take a road widening from registered lots, they merge once they come into single ownership. The dwelling that was on the lot when Union purchased the properties on both sides, and they purchased them as of 1987, the dwelling that was on the lot had 4 parking spaces that were associated with the dwelling. In 2001, that dwelling was demolished, and it left the 4 parking spaces there. And it's important to understand the legal status is that those 4 parking spaces no longer conform with the provisions of the zoning bylaw because they're just out there. They don't belong to anything. So looking forward and to where we are today, the proposal to establish a parking facility for 8 vehicles, a minimum of 8 vehicles, is not an expansion of an existing use. This is a new use, and you should look at it as a new development, completely new development, ignoring what's in the past, happened in the past. And you've been asked, the municipality has been asked, this council has been asked to consider an official plan amendment and a zoning bylaw amendment from shoreline residential to institutional. In my opinion, the shoreline residential area, which is sort of a sliver of land on the west side of Shipley, is there for a reason, and it's historic. This proposal for the development doesn't fit the principles of the shoreline residential development. It is an unusual land use in the sense that today you have 4 parking spaces that come right off Shipley. Along Shipley, there aren't any others. On the other side of the road, there is a development. It's Unifor's major development. They do have parking, but there's a driveway that comes off Shipley and goes to that particular parking lot. This is unusual, the way this has been established and the location. Also, I have a concern, reading the file and reading what the Conservation Authority approved, that the facility will physically encroach into the environmental protection area, notwithstanding what the Conservation Authority believed when they issued a permit. That was not considered by the Conservation Authority. In my opinion, having looked at all of the information, this proposed development does not maintain the character of the historic cottage area in this particular community. As well, what is being proposed to move from shoreline residential to institutional is actually larger than the area that's to be contained, that would contain the 8 parking vehicles. So there may be an opportunity to provide more than 8 vehicles within this area. In my analysis of the information, I don't see a compelling reason why these two planning applications should be approved. I looked at the site plan, which is attached to my report, and it doesn't quite look at all the options to provide additional parking within the property on the west side, or even parking on the east side. So there's no convincing argument that has been made that this location is absolutely essential to the functioning of the Unifor properties. In my opinion, this is not good planning, and in my opinion, but I'll leave that to council, it's not in the public interest. Those are my summary comments regarding my report. Thank you.
The recommendation is that council receive the additional information outlined and attached herein, and that based on the report prepared by Mark Dorfman, FCIP, RPP, council affirms the recommendation of the Saugeen Shores Planning Committee to refuse to approve application Saugeen Shores Official Plan Amendment A 30-1844 and zoning bylaw Z 24-1844 from the Union Building Corporation of Canada. Any questions or comments? Sorry, I've got that motion here. Just a little different tonight. So I'll read the motion then. It's been moved by Councillor Dave Mayette and seconded by Councillor Grace. That council received the additional information outlined and attached herein, and that based on the report prepared by Mark Dorfman, council affirmed the recommendation of the Saugeen Shores Planning Committee to refuse to approve application Saugeen Shores Official Plan Amendment 30-18.44 and zoning 24-1844 from the Union Building Corporation of Canada. Questions, comments? Start with Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Dorfman, I had a question. In your report, you referred to the fact that the SVCA issued the development permit in May of 2018 with the declaration from the applicant that there's no encroachment into the environmental protection zone. And tonight you also said, in your opinion, there will be encroachment. And could I ask what you base your opinion on?
If you look at the zoning bylaw, it has a provision in the zoning bylaw, proposed zoning bylaw, that allows for an encroachment into the environmental protection area in the zoning bylaw. It's an anomaly. I shouldn't say it's an anomaly. There's a conflict between what, remember, the Conservation Authority issued this permit before the matter came to this council for public meeting.
Thank you.
Councillor Minaj.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I need a couple of things explored and understood. Maybe Mr. Dorfman can help me with the first one is, are we clear? Your opinion is that, am I clear that your opinion is that this is an illegal parking lot? It's not legal non-conforming. I believe you state that. You say it can't be construed or it can't be considered as legal non-conforming. So for me, that means it has been, in its entity, has been illegal.
Yes.
Could you characterize that in your words, please?
Yes. It doesn't conform to the provisions of the zoning bylaw, so it's not a legal use. The 4 lots as it exists today.
Okay, thank you. And second point then, and my last one, Mr. Mayor, is at some point we have to look forward. I have to make decisions. I have to make a decision tonight, and I have to think forward. So I'd ask Ms. Dorfman again then, and anybody else in the room for that matter, is if clearly we say you cannot have a parking lot, then the default position, there's probably several, but one default position would be you could go back to building a similar cottage on the same footprint, but is that in fact the case, Mr. Dorfman? Because is there sufficient room now? It was legal non-conforming, so now that it's gone, would any new residential development in the same manner as it was developed before, that would require all kinds of relief from zoning bylaw requirements today? We couldn't just say go back and build what you had there.
That's correct. Because of the size of the residential portion of the lot and the configuration, it requires either a minor variance or an amendment to the zoning bylaw to allow another house to be built there.
Did you have a question, Mike? Any further questions? I'll start here with, Deputy Mayor Charbonneau.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to clarify the question around the Conservation Authority. I think it's really important to remember that the Conservation Authority is enforcing a completely separate regulation from the zoning bylaw. So the environmental protection zone in the zoning bylaw is the Conservation Authority would not base its issuance of a permit on that area. They will issue their permit on the basis of Regulation 16906, and whether or not the application complies with the terms and conditions in that regulation. And so it may very well be that a development could occur in the EP zone in a way that conforms with the regulation, but may not conform with the bylaw, with our zoning bylaw. And so that's the thing. It's not as though there's some contradiction here that is not explained. It's just 2 different regulations. In this case, the Conservation Authority has determined that yes, what's proposed could be built in compliance with the regulation, and now it's our opportunity to decide whether or not it complies with our expectations with regard to the zoning bylaw. I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Madison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like you to confirm 1 or 2 points from here. So this motion is to confirm Mr. Dorfman's assessment that this is not a good use of the land, and goes against our planners at the moment, correct?
I guess I was, recommendation was for approval from our planning staff, and the committees did not accept that and voted against it, and they've gone and found another opinion that supports the committee.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I'll be voting against this. I believe in what our planners have put forward. It's good. I believe it's good use of the land by Unifor, and as I said, I'll be voting against this then.
Okay. Any further comments? Okay, we ready for the question? All in favor? Opposed? That carries. Sorry, I covered the agenda. That's all right. The first one is a zoning bylaw amendment for the Saugeen Golf Club, and it's been moved by Councillor Mike Myatt, second by Councillor Madison, bylaw 85-2018, being a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw number 75-2006, being the comprehensive zoning bylaw for the town of Saugeen Shores by the Saugeen Golf Club for lands described as Part 13, Concession 13, being Part 1, Reference Plan 3R7204, town of Saugeen Shores, Geographic Township of Saugeen, is hereby read a first, second, and third time and finally passed and sealed this 19th day of November 2018. Any questions or comments to the motion or bylaw? All in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. And the next one is a bylaw for the site plan agreement for Keldon Developments. And it's been moved by Councillor Madison, second by Councillor Mike Myatt, that bylaw 86-2018, being a bylaw to authorize a site plan agreement with Keldon Developments Incorporated, is hereby read a first, second, and third time, and finally passed and sealed this 19th day of November 2018. Any questions or comments? All in favor? That's carried. It's been moved by Councillor Rich and seconded by Deputy Mayor Charbonneau that this Planning Committee meeting of November the 19th, 2018, hereby adjourned at 7:48 p.m. All in favor? We're adjourned. I believe